Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing an Ivern guide. So this is going to be mostly jungle with just a sprinkle of potential for support Ivern at the request of Cohen. So special thanks to Travis and Cohen for donating for this video. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to donate for a guide yourself, just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. Let me know what you have in mind. Just $30. I'll do about an hour-long guide, usually 30 minutes to an hour. If you're a channel member, then it's just $5 off. So 25 for a guide, and then you can do $5 off of coaching as well. 25 for non-members, 20 for members, and then if you are a member, you can come out and play with us as well if you want on Sundays. Grab a couple of games with other members and me. It's a good time. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And check out the rest of the content on the channel as well, really quick if you haven't. There's a ton of other champion guides. I do tier lists for every patch. Have a coaching session playlist with like 200 coaching sessions on it. I stream every night starting around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. Very interactive. I try to, hold a conversation with the chat while at the same time I'm playing. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. It's a really friendly, chill community, so come by, check it out. We'd love to have you. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And I will preface this by saying I'm not a jungle main, I'm a support main, and I'm definitely not an Ivern main. I did play him some back in the day, but I have not played him consistently in probably at least a year or so. So Travis and Cohen know this. They just asked for me to just do the best that I could to do this guide. So that's what we're going to do. So if you know any tricks that I don't mention or you have any advice, if you have a lot of experience with Ivern out there, then please let us know in the comments. We're really happy to have multiple voices in on this. Okay, but let's talk about really quickly Ivern's, just how he works and what he does. So Ivern is a very obscure champion. As of the making of this video, he has not really been popular for almost 2 years, maybe even 2.5 years at this point. And there are several reasons for that. However, right now he is the #1 win rate champ in the jungle. So for people that know how to play him, he is actually quite good. Let me see if I can pull up that list here real quick. I'm pretty sure he was #1, at least in Platinum Plus. Jungle win rate, #1. Now he's tied with Warwick, but he only has a 1.1% pick rate, so he's very, very rare. You don't see him very often, but most people that play him are Ivern mains. But if you do get proficient on him, obviously he can be very strong in this meta right now. And they just did a lot of stuff to change the jungle, and I haven't really played the jungle a ton since these changes in the preseason. I play it a little bit in my spare time, but once again, mostly do support. But let's look at Ivern here real quick. So the main thing that makes Ivern different from a lot of other champions is that he doesn't actually attack the monsters in the jungle. He puts a little like happy circle around them, and then after a certain amount of time, then he can come back and click that circle and instantly clear the camp. Now, setting up that circle, though, costs quite a bit of health, especially in the early game, and it costs quite a bit of mana. So you have to be very careful with your pathing. You have to be very careful with those circles, especially because a lot of enemy junglers, particularly the early game aggressive junglers, and there's a lot of them out there right now, but like your Lee Sins, your Xin Zhaos, and things like that, they're going to know they can come invade Ivern. And if they take your camps while they're circled, that really, really sucks early on because you're not going to be able to fight him early on unless you have a lot of help from your laners. So he's very vulnerable to invades in the early game because it takes a while for these circles to power up. Level 1 is 40 seconds, and then it slowly goes down to be a little bit faster, but there's going to be a delay. And you're going to be behind in levels early on, too, while you're waiting for that 40 seconds. So if they hit like a level 2 or a level 3 power spike and come and fight you in the jungle, it's going to be a big problem. So a lot of times you want to make sure that you're not interacting with the enemy jungler for the first few levels at least, unless you're deliberately trying to bait or set something up. So, however, that does leave him with a lot of time to do different things. And because he doesn't care which jungle camps he's clearing, then he can clear anything in any order. Even some of the enemy stuff, you can instantly counter jungle it if you just show up like one of their buffs. You put the circle on it. If you smite it, then it clears it instantly. So you can use your early smite for one of the best invades yourself in the game if you can sneak it off. So it's very easy to 3-buff people with Ivern, but you have to know where they are. A lot of people expect that out of Ivern, so you got to be careful with the wards. But that's what makes him really different. It's just playing around these different buffs. Because you don't have to sit there and clear it, which is great. I mean, you just tag it and then just walk away and go do something else. But the problem is if they go in and get it before you clear it. So that does leave you with some time to gank as well, but you're usually really low on health after tagging camps. So typically you'll just go through, tag a bunch of camps, maybe smite, steal one of the enemy camps, and then you just go back and buy, get boots really quickly, and then you come back through and you clear all the stuff on your second, or on your first clear through, rather. So that makes him kind of weird in the jungle in the early game, because there's always this delay, but you always have the potential for smite stealing enemy camps if you know where they are. I mean, buffs are awesome, but even grabbing something like their raptors, or you know, just insta grabbing a scuttle or something like that that you know they might be pathing for, can be very powerful. Okay, so that's kind of his marquee thing that you just kind of really have to get used to with him. Once again, I don't know exactly how many you can set up in the early game. It used to be, I think you could grab like 4 or something before you ran out of health to do it. But if you use your smite to get back some health, if you're not using it level 1 to invade, then I don't remember how much the smite heals for early on too. But he can clear probably like 4 or 5 if you're using your smite and taking one of the enemy camps. You can clear 4 or 5 of them most likely. You can put down the circles and then go back and do it. Now another thing about that is when you're trying to cycle back, you want to think ahead and say, okay, I'm going to set them up this way, but then you either have to back or you have to path back to where you were before so that you can grab them back in order as they become available. So it's really weird. It takes a little while to get used to, but that's how it works. Also, you do get to hand off your buffs. Once you're at level 5, you do get to hand off your Brambleback and your Blue Sentinels. That's nice to give your mid laner a blue and maybe give your ADC a red or your top laner a red. That can be pretty useful too and pretty impactful depending on the matchup. Okay, Root Collar. And Ivern has been nerfed a lot from when he was really popular, by the way. Especially his Trigger Seed. This thing, it used to shield for 240, so it's pretty close. They've buffed it back to where the shield is pretty close to where it used to be. But the damage used to be 180 or 190, I believe, and the slow used to be 70% flat for 3 seconds. So they've nerfed that a ton. And the other thing that they nerfed over time, if you haven't played him in a long time, this Brushmaker used to have 1600 range, which was huge because that would allow you to scout from a very long distance and keep track of where the enemy jungler is so that you don't interact with them if you don't want to. So they nerfed that a lot. They did nerf it down to 800 and they buffed it back up to 1000, but it's nowhere near as strong as it used to be when it was 1600. It was one of the best checking abilities in the game. But Root Collar, you throw out a root, it sticks to people, does some damage, roots them for a fairly small amount in the early game. I mean, 1.2 is okay. But then if you click on it, it'll bring you to within attack range. Now, they did change him recently, and this was something that was controversial with a lot of people, but they did change it to where he is considered ranged now instead of melee. So he has 475 range. It used to be you had to stand in a plant, you had to stand in a brush before you got the range. Now it's permanently ranged. Now, I think... Dash to them, allies stopping, I think Ivern stopping it. Okay, so they did change this actually. So people cried about this a lot because what you can do in the jungle is you can Root Collar over walls, and that allows you to save numerous seconds in the jungler, which adds up over time. So like you could Root Collar the raptors and then get over there and save a few seconds, or you could, after you clear red, you could Root Collar and get to the golems. So it just allowed you, that was like your dash where you could jump around the jungle and do stuff. You know, Root Collar over the Dragon Pit or the Baron Pit or whatever. But when they made it to 475 range, then it was stopping you from going over those walls. So now they've fixed it. Now he always goes to 125 no matter what. And then your ranged allies will go to their maximum auto attack range when they go. So it's pretty useful early on to just kind of zip around. This is what you're going to max second. Has pretty good range, 1100. It's a very, very slow speed. It's pretty easy to dodge. I think it's like Morgana-esque type of speed. It it's similar. It's similar to Morg, but it has a much skinnier hitbox. So it takes some getting used to. It has a little cast time too of 0.25, so it can be a little on the clunky side. But it does do decent damage later on for 60 mana. It can do up to 260 damage and root for up to 2 seconds. So later on in the game, it is pretty good. But early on, You're going to be using that mostly just to zip around the jungle. Then if you do go for a gank, you want to wait on them to flash if you can, or use their mobility, and then go for that root caller. Okay, Brushmaker. Now this is something that doesn't seem that amazing at first glance, but it's actually pretty good. It allows you to put down the brush anywhere on the map that you want. So he's obviously going to be very good with things like Rengar. We'll talk about that when we talk about Ivern Support. There are some other champions that interact with brush really well. Champions that, like anyone with Duskblade that can go out of vision, can use that pretty well. Obviously, Caitlyn stacking headshots. Nidalee gets a little bit of extra movement speed, I think, when she goes through a brush. So there's some champs where it's pretty good. Or really anything that has like a really scary skill shot and you want to keep them from seeing it coming. So like a Blitzcrank with a Blitz hook, or Nautilus hook, or things like that can be very good. So with his brush collar, like you can put up your brush maker and then they're not gonna, or it's gonna be harder for them to see where the root collar is coming from. So it can be pretty clutch. You gotta be careful with this though, because if you put this in the wrong place in a fight, it can really be very detrimental to your team. If they have a Blitzcrank, or they have something that's really strong, that's melee, and you put that brush up on the enemy or very close to them, and then your ranged champions can't attack that melee champion that just went into the brush, that can create some serious line of sight issues. So you got to be careful with it, but it can be very useful and very sneaky. It can help you defend towers. It can block out like dragon pits and baron pits and choke points and things like that. You know, people aren't going to know like if your team's there or not if you block off the choke. So they might just, you know, come up and, you know, you could catch them off guard with the brush. So that can be really useful. And then like I mentioned earlier, it does give you target location for 30 seconds. Now it only reveals for 3 seconds, but it does reveal brush. So if you put this in a brush, it will reveal the area for a while. So that helps you to where you don't have to face check anything. You don't have to walk up and ward. So that's really nice when they're trying to position for things like Baron or an important dragon or whatever. It gives you just one extra way to ward and kind of get vision there. And it has a much, much longer range than warding does. So that can be pretty useful for checking different things. Now, I wish it was the 1600 again. That was like really, really far where you could spawn it. But overall, still going to be pretty solid. Also gives you 30 bonus attack damage if you want that. There have been some people that have tried out a Hail of Blades Ivern build early on where you can get off like 3 really quick auto attacks with that bonus empowerment whenever you're in a brush. But his base attack damage is pretty low. I mean, that would take it up to 80 damage per hit with the extra 30. It has a really low win rate overall compared to most normal builds. So it was cute. I think there were some all caps videos that were trying to push it. You know, but the domination build with the Hail of Blades only has less than a 50% win rate, and just your standard like airy type of build is going to have, you know, almost a 55% win rate, at least at higher elo brackets. So it's cute, but I probably wouldn't go for that. We'll talk about runes more here in a second, but that is a possibility. I don't remember who was doing that with the all caps pro guides or something like that, but I don't know. Probably not that great. And then Trigger Seed is going to be sort of his main marquee ability other than his passive. And this is one of the better shields in the game. It's pretty solid. It gets down to an 8-second cooldown, 220 base shield, which is really nice, a 0.8 ratio, which is really, really high. And it also does damage, AoE damage, to everyone around the target, even if the shield gets broken, for 140. Now, it's not the same as the 180 or 190 that it used to be, but it's still pretty solid. And, you know, a 40% slow for 2 seconds is still pretty good. It's not decaying. It does last the whole time. And you do max this first. So, you know, at level 5, you will have a 50% slow, and it'll do 100 damage, 150 shield. So, pretty solid, especially for how low the cooldown is on it. So this is really good with like Athenes also because it not only gives a shield, but it does potentially AoE damage, and that allows you to stack up the Athenes for the next time that you trigger that shield. And then Daisy. Now they have, excuse me, I'm still getting over a bit of a cold. They have changed the AI on Daisy, I think, to make her a little bit better. But you have to control her. Like, you can press your R basically to tell her where to go and where to attack. So like once you already have R pressed, you can just, you know, hover over your target and then just press R and she'll move that direction. Just decent damage, you know, 70 auto attack damage, and every third damage it like does this little shockwave move that knocks people up. Flower power. So that's pretty handy, and she does get a little bit of extra bonus movement speed. I think they slowed her movement speed over time a little bit. Oh yeah, 419. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it used to be higher than that. Now, one thing about Daisy that kind of sucks is that the enemy can smite her. The enemy jungler can smite her. Like Nunu can consume her. Anything that does extra damage to minions or monsters is going to be really rough. So the fact that the jungler can come up and like smite half of her health away true damage is pretty rough. Because when you don't have like Daisy, you're a lot weaker. Because Daisy just adds so much disruption to fights. Because she is kind of hard to kill. Especially because you can shield her yourself. You can drop things like Trigger Seed, and if you hit Root Caller, Daisy will jump to the Root Caller target. So she can be very disruptive in a fight overall. So you got to kind of practice her. I mean, she can tank tower shots. She can help you attack towers and, you know, does pretty decent damage. Ivern's still going to be on the slow side, taking towers, taking dragons, and things like that. But Daisy certainly does help out with that a little bit. She's on a really long cooldown, though, 160 seconds. But that does start when you cast her. And she stays on the battlefield for 60 seconds. So even if you keep her up for like 30 seconds, then she'll be back shortly thereafter, probably. So that's pretty much how he works, just sort of the basics of him. And we'll go over like a couple of tricks and things like that here a little bit later in the video. But so his main strengths are going to be, he has cheap items. We'll talk about that here in a second. And this is mostly why he got nerfed a ton, is because he cheats the curve. Like anything that gets enchanter items that's not a support typically gets nerfed pretty quickly. Because those items are extremely gold efficient, especially on a champion that is going to be getting like a pretty good gold income. So they're designed to be for supports who don't get a lot of money, and so therefore when you have a jungler or a solo laner getting these items, then it can create some serious problems. So for example, you know, if the enemy is waiting on 2,900 gold for some lethality item, and you're able to get your Ardent Censer at 2,300 gold, and then you're, you know, a third of your way to your next item, your Athene's Unholy Grail, then that's going to create a lot of issues. So that's a really huge part of him. He also has really strong scaling with plus healing and shielding. A lot of people don't understand just why plus healing and shielding is strong. I have to talk about this all the time in my support videos, especially when enchanters are really strong right now, which enchanters are great, by the way. Be sure to check out the support tier list. You've got Soraka and Janna being the number 1 and number 2 supports. The reason for this is that shielding scales with magic resist and armor. So if you put a 100 shield on somebody who has 0 magic resist and 0 armor, it's going to take, you know, 100 physical damage to break that shield. Okay, simple enough. But if you have 100 armor on that person on a 100 shield, it's going to take 200 physical damage to break that shield. Okay, so that's where it starts to become really strong. If you have 200 armor on somebody, then it's going to take 300 damage to break that 100 shield. So every point of armor that somebody has, it requires the enemy to do 1% more physical damage to do the equivalent amount of damage to the person. So if you have 1,000 HP, for example, and 100 armor, it's going to take 2,000 damage to kill you overall, because it's going to take 100% more physical damage. And shields benefit from that. There are many games out there where shields don't have that. Shields are, it's true damage. Whatever you do to a shield, that's it. League of Legends is not one of those games. League of Legends benefits from magic resist, or from resistances on your shields. So that's why healing and shielding scales so extremely well. And there's a stat, the plus healing and shielding stat gives out a tremendous amount of extra healing and shielding. So most of these champions that have heals and shields, they're going to have a base shield, then they're going to have an AP ratio on it typically, and then they're going to have plus healing and shielding on top of that, and then if they take something like Revitalize, and that stacks on top of that, and that all stacks multiplicatively. So for example, if you have like a 100 base shield from your AP and items, then you get plus 50 on that shield. Now it's 150 shield. Then if you have plus 20%, plus healing and shielding, then it's going to get an extra 30. So 1/5 of that 150, that's 180. And then if you have something like Revitalize, which is going to give you a total of 15% more potential plus healing and shielding, and then all of a sudden that's going to give you like over 200 shield. So that's why all of that stuff stacks up together. When you get a lot of AP and you get a lot of plus healing and shielding, and your allies start getting a lot of resists, armor and magic resists, then that's why it becomes almost impossible to kill people later on in the game when there are shield champions around. And shield is not affected by grievous wounds either. So if someone gets executioners and Morellonomicon, it doesn't affect shields. It does affect plus healing and shielding, or it does affect healing, but not shielding. So that's why he has super strong scaling, as does anything that has big shielding in the game. He's awesome in team fights. He just has a lot of disruption. Root Collar allows people to be sticky. Brushmaker can be really annoying if you use that correctly, mostly by shrouding skill shots, like we mentioned before. Makes it very difficult for the enemy to figure out what's going on. Trigger Seed, AoE damage, point-click shield, pretty big shield on a fairly low cooldown. And then you have Daisy, who is just getting in the way, blocking skill shots, soaking damage, knocking up people with flower power. He's just very, very sticky and just really annoying to try to get through. And then he has really versatile pathing in the jungle is another great strength. So he can start anywhere. Getting a blue is nice, but you can start the enemy's blue too. So you really could be anywhere on the map starting up. You can have any kind of pathing because it does the monsters don't matter. It's all just cost you the same amount to click on them. So really, really versatile pathing. So it's up to you to kind of outsmart the enemy jungler and move around the map. Okay, weaknesses. As we mentioned before, very, very vulnerable early because you have to wait about 40 seconds at those early levels before your camps come about. Whereas most champions can clear a camp in under 40 seconds, right? Some of the power clearers out there are going to be able to clear a champ in 5 or 10 seconds, or clear a camp in 5 or 10 seconds. So they're going to be ahead of you on camps. They're going to be ahead on levels and power early on, typically. So you need to be very, very careful with that because you're super vulnerable early. He is terrible at dueling, especially in the early game. Just do not ever try to fight a Lee Sin or a Zen Shao or whatever. Maybe with that Hail of Blades build, I don't know. I haven't seen it in action, but I think he's pretty renowned for being pretty terrible early on in dueling, mostly because he's going to be behind in levels and he doesn't do any damage. He does take dragons and Baron fairly slowly. Daisy does chip in and help a little bit, but realistically, his damage is very, very low. So it's going to be difficult to take those things. And then he has a pretty weak pre-6. If you hit the Root Collar, it's nice. If they have some kind of engage, then he's a lot better. Because the Trigger Seed, you can put that on a Leona or something if you gank bot lane. And then after they do their rotation, then Trigger Seed will go. It'll slow for a little bit longer, and that will allow you to hit your Root Collar. So, there are some situations where, hitting them with the Trigger Seed slow and then going for the Root Collar can get you some kills, but it's going to be weaker than a lot of the other junglers out there, I think. Okay, so I recommend going Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning. I don't know why I put Font of Life on there twice. Revitalize. And then Zombie Warden and Genius or Ulti Hunter. Now, I like Ulti Hunter a lot because Daisy is very, very important. You don't really function in team fights without Daisy. And, it's a very long base cooldown. So getting that cooldown reduction is very nice. And then Zombie Wards give you a little bit of extra vision. And they also allow you to stack up AP, which is going to be really nice on him in the mid games. He has very, very good AP ratios. And then I like Guardian as well. It's just going to give you a lot more survivability in team fights. Going to give you some big shields. Font of Life is also pretty good because you apply an AoE slow off a Trigger Seed. You have Root Collar that can apply a root. Daisy with her knockup applies a disable. So if you go for Ardent Sensor early on, it's going to be a lot easier to put that Ardent Sensor on all of your allies rather than being forced to shield yourself, or rather to shield the ADC in order to get the Ardent Sensor buff. So if you take Font of Life, it just gives you a lot more flexibility with who you put Trigger Seed on. If you need to put it on Daisy, you need to put it on your engaged tank or whatever, then it frees you up for that. Now, conditioning is pretty good. After 10 minutes, it's going to give you a lot more survivability. Usually, even if you don't build any like magic resist or armor, it's still going to be pretty good. It's going to be like 500, 600 gold value. So it's a really valuable rune. Obviously, you know, bone plating and second wind aren't going to be that useful for a jungler, but I think that conditioning is pretty good. And then revitalize on any heal and shield champion is just pretty much OP. Gives you a lot of extra value out of that, up to 15% effective plus healing and shielding. So I think that's really strong. And then, you know, he mentioned Zombie Ward Ulti Hunter. Now, there are some Iverns that do that. One of the more popular builds, however, on him is this Airy build. So you'll go typically Airy Nullifying Orb, and I see most people that I researched going for Celerity and Water Walking. This does give you some more movement around rivers, which is pretty good. And then, you know, typically you're going to get mobility boots on Ivern, so you can walk around and, you know, pick up your jungle camps a lot faster. So that is good. I feel like Airy's pretty weak because you're not actually going to be dueling anyone in the early games. You're kind of wasting the damage portion. It does put on some okay shields, you know, later on. It's not going to be as good as Guardian, I don't think, but you do have a fairly low cooldown shield that you can keep applying with Airy later on. So, and that does scale with plus healing and shielding. So, it's kind of up to you. It's okay. To me, it just feels weird putting on a champion that's not going to, like, really attack people at all early on in the game. But it's okay. Now, a lot of people here also go for Futures Market and Cosmic. I assume, now I don't know the exact breakpoints once again, but I assume this is so you can get faster mobility boots. Maybe after you get, like, 5 camps or something, you might have enough gold to get mobility boots. And you can rush Moby super fast on Ivern because you never want to upgrade your jungle item. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But that might be a reason to do it. I feel like that's a little bit advanced, though, with Futures Market. You have to know the timings really well and the exact amount of gold that you need to back on and exactly which camps you need. And it requires, like, very specific timing. So I feel like that's a little bit advanced, you know, for people that are, like, maybe Platinum and lower. So that's why I don't recommend Futures Market ever, but sometimes you see challengers doing it because they understand exact breakpoints. But if you know a really good build with that, if it is something like Rush Mobies, like I'm thinking of, and you know exactly which camps you need to take and why, and like exactly when you're going to get it, if you're practiced on him, it can be good. And then Cosmic Insight's pretty good because it gives you more cooldowns on your Smite, which is awesome. So that's more; those are more camps you can counter jungle from the enemy. And then you get a decent chunk of activatables as well. You get at least Redemption, and then there might be some builds where you end up with something like a Mikhail's to help out as well. So that does give you a little bit there. And then obviously you get the 5% CDR. You've got pretty good disruptive ability, so CDR is always good. So I recommend, if you want to go for this build here, that you try out probably Perfect Timing instead of Cosmic Insight. You could take Biscuits. This would give you a safer clear early on. If you want that, it will give you more mana. Now, you know, this might allow you to clear one more camp before you have to back. So, once again, I don't know the exact breakpoints, but this could actually be pretty instrumental if you're trying to go for, you know, 1 or 2 more camps off of that. And it does end up giving you 150 mana, which is okay. I mean, that's like an extra 200 gold or so. So I didn't see anybody going Biscuits, but I could see a world where maybe that's possible. You don't want to go Magical Footwear because you want to rush Mobies like immediately. You don't want to have to wait 12 minutes on that. So it's pretty much either Perfect Timing, Futures Market, or Biscuits, and then always Cosmic Insight if you're going with this build. Now, this build does not have Revitalize. I think Revitalize is super good, but I mean, if we look at the runes here for Ivern, the highest win rate runes are going to be the green tree runes, right? It's going to be Guardian, Revitalize. They like second wind there. Conditioning's not that much lower, though. But those are the highest win rate runes. Now, Airy's not that much lower. Airy's 54%. So all of these, you know, Airy to Guardian is just like a 1% difference. But I'm just showing you that, like, this stuff is pretty viable, even though there's less people that tend to take this. I do like Revitalize a lot. Ultimate Hunter is a notable standout here with like 55%. So I think that's pretty solid. You could also go for the airy version and then pick up something like conditioning and revitalize as your secondaries if you want to. Yeah, those are some different rune paths there, and then as far as items go, you never upgrade just because he doesn't get a lot of value out of that. You know, you do see some people go for the like Runic Echoes build, but it's just too expensive. The fact that you can get these cheaper items that are going to be much, much more effective means that you should be getting those items most of the time. You know, and this is a little misleading. I forgot to put Shirelia's on there as well, but Shirelia's could be situational as well. Okay. Now you got to be careful looking at win rates on these items. You got to look at the minute when they got it, right? So like Death Cap is good, but that's usually like a third item, and it's probably if you're already like hard winning the game, you know. So Ardent Sensor is going to be one that you get like fairly early on a lot of times. That can be really strong if your team is pretty far ahead. I'm pretty shocked to see that Athene's is down here. But yeah, like this item that like the finished Runic Echoes, I think it's like 30, it's either like 3,000 or 3,200 gold. It's just way, way too much. You could have like half of an Athene's Unholy Grail and an Ardent Sensor for the same price. So that's why people never really upgrade that. Also, you don't want to be dueling people most of the time when you're Ivern, right? So you're not really interested in challenging Smite. You don't need the basic attacks doing extra damage to monsters because you don't interact with the monsters. All you do is put your little happy circle around them. You're not fighting the monsters. So it just wastes a lot of the passives. It's just really, really not worth the money. So that's one thing that's really, among many, that's really weird about Ivern is you never upgrade the talisman. The mana early on is good. You go talisman refillable. That's good. But then after that, just skip it. Just hold on to your talisman and just start getting other items. Now, I see Athene's as a very popular item. This is very strong. It does give you, early on, it does give you Chalice, which is very nice for your first couple of clears. I don't know if I have the items pulled up here, but like Chalice, basically all of your percentage mana regen turns into health regen. Although I think, let me actually pull this up here. Did they change it to mana per 5? I think they may have changed it off of mana per 5, which was an indirect nerf to him a while ago. Hunter's Talisman. Mana per second. 0 to 8 mana per second. So that's not a percentage of mana. Yeah, so they nerfed that. But Chalice of Heart... So, like, the interaction I was looking for is... Chalice of Harmony, for every 25% of mana regen that you get off of things like Fairy Charm, it turns into health regen, which is very nice on Ivern because he runs low on health early. But Talisman does not interact with that. It's a different kind of mana that's not based on... that's not based on the traditional Fairy Charm thing. So, anyway, so it's not quite the same, but it will still give you a little bit... of extra health regen when you get that. And then when you finish Athene's, it does give you a pretty good spike in terms of AP. And it's just pretty well rounded because you do a decent chunk of just collateral damage in fights, you know, with your E exploding, with Daisy running up, landing hits. You can charge up that Athene's pretty quickly and get some decent duels in there. Especially if the enemy team has a lot of magic damage, then you can get the resistances there and it can be really good. Now, Ardent Sensor is something that a lot of people get that is very good on Ivern as well. I would say if the ADC is doing well, or if you have some other auto attacker on your team that's doing really well, like maybe you've got a Jax top lane or something like that, then Ardent can be really good. That's going to give you a little bit more AP early on than Athene's will, and it's going to give you those buffs. Now, one thing, I guess a lot of people are rushing Ardent first now because they did change this, and you're seeing it on Diana now. Whenever you shield yourself, then you also get the on-hit. Even if you're the only person around, you also get the on-hit damage and the attack speed. So if you do have to duel someone in the jungle, that can work. Or if you are trying to do something like get a dragon or something like that, then that can be useful. But usually you're shielding other people, and it's going to give you the Ardent Sensor buff regardless. So Ardent is very nice. A lot of people like to go Ardent. You can definitely do that if you want. So Ardent, Athene's. Redemption is very nice because it gives you like a semi-global ability. You can drop that sort of anytime, anywhere. It does give you a huge amount of mana regen. So that's a great combination with Athene's Unholy Grail because that's going to convert over to 30 extra AP off of the mana regen. So Athene's plus Redemption is a great combo. So yeah, that's going to be really strong for team fights. So these three are kind of the core that you see most of the time on most, if you look here, on most Iverns, right? It's going to be some combination of those three typically. The order that you get them kind of depends on what's going on in the game. But those are kind of the set in stone ones. Now, other optional ones that you could get, Mikhail's is good if they have a ton of CC on their team. So if they've got something like a, Leona and an Ashe or something like that, that can be pretty solid. It's just a lot more situational. It's not going to have as much raw power or sort of team fight contributions as a Redemption or an Ardent Sensor. But hey, sometimes cleansing off like a really clutch piece of CC can mean the difference in winning the fight or not if they are stacking on a chain CC. Now, keep in mind, it does not cleanse suppression, so it doesn't work on Malzahar or Skarner, and it doesn't get you out of like a Mordekaiser ult or something like that. But there's still a lot of really good things that can do. It also incidentally speeds somebody up for 2 seconds for 40%, makes them immune to slows. So, I've used Mikhail's, use it all the time on Soraka, and that is a nice little perk, is that sometimes you can just cleanse a slow off of someone just to give them that big speed so they can catch up. Then Shirley's is another one. I didn't see too many Iverns doing that, but I could see a situation where that could work if you have a bunch of goons on your team, that are just like big meatballs. You've got like a Mundo or an Olaf, a Darius. There's a bunch of stuff that can be really dangerous but can also get kited. Then Shirley's can help you out with that. But, once again, not going to have as much raw power as some of these other ones. Okay, so real quickly, I can't cover all of the jungle paths and things like that with Ivern. You probably have to just watch some highlight videos or something online for that. But really, you can start anywhere. The biggest thing with Ivern, though, is you want to predict where the enemy jungler is going to be, and then you want to... go to the opposite side a lot of times. It depends on if you think they're going to invade you. There's a lot of mind games with Ivern. Like, he's not very straightforward at all. So most people will tend to start red side bottom because they get a better leash. So early on, if you can run over here and just try to get a ward in somewhere, like just see if you can ward like maybe here or something. And then I've seen a lot of junglers doing this too, where they'll ward really quickly and then they'll go back and they'll switch over to a sweeper. Now, you can do that, or you can just keep your wards. I think that the wards are pretty good on Ivern early on because you need to know where the enemy jungler is going to be. And they changed that last patch to where I think if you change the sweeper, it's going to have the same cooldown as your ward anyways on the first ward. So I'm not sure that you get a lot of value out of that. But you want to get over here and ward and just see if anyone's going to be watching this or not. If no one's watching this, and the lower the elo is, the less likely someone's going to watch it. But it's very common that Ivern takes stuff. So try to get your bot lane or your mid laner to go ward your blue. And then you come in and you try to just take their blue. Just snipe it out. And if you're not sure if it's warded or not, or if anyone's looking, what you can do is just go ahead and like tag your red, tag your raptors, and then path over here. And then tag your blue. If you want to go over here, and then you just use your smite on this, and that if you have this warded, that'll give you plenty of time to see if they're starting there or if they're top laners there and they leave. It can give you some really good intel. So that's kind of the safer way, is just go red. I guess you could even tag all three of these. You could just go like red, or you could even start golems if you wanted to. It's like golems, red, raptors, go over here, grab blue. And then you can path back, grab these, and then Scuttle's probably up, and you can try to grab Scuttle too with your second smite. So that's one option. Another option is you could just start blue and then just come over here, just take their blue immediately, come up here, and then just take everything. 3, just work your way all the way down as much as you can. I think if you use your refillables, and you have your talisman for the mana regen, I think you might be able to get all of them with the enemy blue ticking away. You might be a little low on health at the end. You may not quite be able to get golems, but you should be able to go top to bottom, and then maybe you're going to be like super low health, but you might be able to contest the scuttle if you see them up here on your ward or something like that. Yeah, that's one way to do it. You know, if they are watching this and you're too scared to invade, you know, you can just go for a straight, you know, just all the way down if you want. Then you back, or I guess you have to like path back up and then go back through, and then you have enough money to back. You back, get your Moby boots, and then rotate around like that. If you're on blue side, then you would want to start, like they're going to start here, so then you would start over here and try to go get their red if you can. You always want to see if you can get one of their buffs, although it is, you know, once again, notorious that Ivern does that, so you need to have it warded. You need to be very, very careful. Ideally, you know, you need to be watching their mid laner very carefully, because a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have their top laner watch this, or sometimes the jungler might even be standing here. And if you just try to walk up here and face tank like a Lee Sin, you could be in big trouble. That's why I like just like warding over this wall, and then if you can get there, just warding over the wall, then just tagging a couple of your camps. You know, it's like tag wolves, blue, Gromp, and then come over here and try to smite steal it. Then that way it gives the jungler is going to reveal themselves, so you can see, oh, their jungler actually was there whenever you start clearing your blue, or maybe their top laner runs away out of the bush, and that gives you time to come over here. And then you would just grab the red, get out, clear this stuff, and then come down, tag all of these, go back, get boots, collect these, and so on and so forth. So there are a few walls where you can do tricks too, like right here. You can like use your Q over this wall to grab that. Once you grab like red, you can use your Q to go over this wall. Things like if you're ever coming back from base, you can like Q and get the wolves. You know, if you're trying to be sneaky and sneak a dragon or something, you can Q and try to get dragon. So, you know, just a lot of things you got to get used to. You can go over walls with the Q fairly often, though. And then as far as ganking goes, you know, a lot of times you just want to make sure you get your early camps so that you don't get murdered. That's kind of like goal number one. But if someone is pushed up, especially after you get your first back, you know, you get some boots, you heal up a little bit, then you might be able to, you know, come up and gank people. But it's all just going to be dependent on where the enemy jungler is. I mean, you just need to avoid them like the plague, you know. And a lot of that's going to come down to knowledge of the enemy jungler, what they're likely to do, and then vision. You have to have control wards so you can stay away from them. So early on, you know, you need to try to keep control wards in these pixel bushes if you can, so you can see if they're trying to rotate and invade. That's also going to help your laners out a ton in order to avoid ganks. But, you know, if you see, like, the enemy jungler, like, you're pathing down here, and you see, okay, enemy jungler is also pathing over here, you're going to need to do something else. You're going to say, oh, crap, well, instead of coming down here, because I saw him, like, maybe right here, then you can come over and grab his jungle instead, right? So instead of going down here, you just call it audible, call that off, then you rotate over here. So then just vertical jungle is what they'll call that, pretty much, if that happens, which is where you give them part of your jungle and you just go trade and take part of their jungle. Now, if you see something like that, you need to tell your bot lane to watch out because they might come in behind them. And on the flip side, if you're over here, you take all this stuff, then you might be able to make a play on top lane or something like that. But it's just, Ivern is definitely the thinking man or the thinking woman's jungler. So you need to be ready to be studying, be doing your homework, because you're just pretty much playing hide and go seek with the enemy jungler the whole time. Okay, and we'll go ahead and start to finish up here. Now, Cohen wanted me, he said he was a really big fan of Ivern Support, and I promised him I would do part of the guide on Ivern Support here. This is a for fun choice most of the time in the bot lane. It's not going to be viable in most metas. I think when he first came out, when he had really overpowered stats, when he had like a 55% win rate in the jungle, I think I saw him bot lane like one time. But there are a couple of things that I'll go over the challenges to him, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you can do with him that where it might be able to work. So one of the biggest challenges with Ivern is that a lot of his balance is based on his friend of the forest, right? So the fact that he can interact with camps, take them quickly, counter jungle efficiently, and just like be really unpredictable in the jungle. You just kind of don't know where he's going to be or what he's going to be doing, because he can clear, in any number of ways. So that's part of it, and you don't really have that as a support. I mean, you can try to take something like Smite um, as a support, but unless you're completely just murdering them, like, you're not gonna be able to go. I know it's like living the dream, but if I take Smite, I can go like take their camps and things like that. But the thing is, Ivern is really dangerous most of the time. If you are trying to rotate up here and like you're almost never gonna take one of their big camps. I mean, maybe you can pull that off like once, but they're almost always gonna have that warded and guarded. But like, it's hard to get up in here, and take something like Blue or Grom. It's hard enough just to get up there and ward sometimes. But yeah, Ivern has virtually no escapes. He's really slow. He doesn't have dashes. He doesn't have speed ups. So if you get caught out, it's going to be a big problem. So it's like, if you have a really heavy push lane, maybe you push him under tower, like let's say, but you don't push very well yourself. You've got your E, I guess, your trigger shield you can kind of push. But like if you have like a Caitlyn or something who just like can hard push, and then they are running like Ezreal Braum or something, and they're getting pushed in, like maybe you can loop around. Now, one thing you can get are the scuttles. So if scuttle spawns, sometimes, especially at lower elo brackets, people won't prioritize scuttle as heavily. So you can actually sneak up and grab the scuttle if you want. But it's just going to be really hard with Smite unless you're completely dominating people. Now, one thing I wish they did, which they might do in the future, I haven't heard any word they might do this, but like, it'd be nice if they did. I remember Freak said they had this on Magma Chamber, which was a map they were testing like 5 or 6 years ago. But if they ever put like a camp here, then that's going to become a lot better, potentially. I'm not saying Ivern Support would be like super mainstream, but this would certainly help if they put something like a Gromp here, and you could just tag it, and then push forward. But then your ADC is going to want it, and they're going to rage at you if you take that camp. So, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But anyway, so taking Smite's kind of weird. Maybe you could take, like, Smite with Unsealed Spellbook and use, like, other summoners. But it's just too gimmicky, I think, like, to take the Smite. So you're not going to be able to take Smite, which means you're not going to be able to use your passive effectively. I mean, you can try to tag the Scuttle and see if nobody touches it for 40 seconds. Maybe you could sneak in and get it just normally with your passive, but it's going to be rough. So that's one thing you're missing out on. The other thing that I just mentioned is that, like, he's very squishy. His base stats are pretty low. I mean, 585 on the health is actually not that bad for an enchanter. But the 27 armor is on the low side. His movement speed is very low. It's got 330 on the movement speed. He does have range now, so he can kind of attack people. But 475 is really low range. Anything else that's ranged is going to have more range than he does. His base health regen is actually pretty decent. So it's like, it's okay. But let's be real. If you get hooked by a Leona and pulled in, it's going to be a big issue. Now, he also only has 6 mana regen flat, which is terrible. That means your Fairy Charm items are not going to be that great on you in the laning phase. He can get away with that in the jungle because he also has Talisman to help him out with the mana. But he's going to be hurting for mana in the laning phase. So his base stats are pretty low. He's going to get blown up. Root Caller is good if you hit that. If you have a melee bot laner and they can get in and maybe kill some people, like you've got like a Yasuo or something, or a Rengar, or you just have some kind of unorthodox bot lane, then Root Caller can be pretty good. But the damage is going to be fairly low early on. Brushmaker's okay in some circumstances. Once again, if you have some non-traditional, like, heavy skill shot champ with Brushmaker, that can be pretty solid. You do get a little bit of extra bonus attack damage if you land it on people. It does allow you to check stuff. It allows you to check bushes and things like that, so it does give you some more control. Now, the shield is good. I mean, the shield's really solid. Like, It's like a Janna shield on a lower cooldown that also does damage and has a slow on it. So, the shield is pretty good. So that part of his kit's solid. And then Daisy is sticky, is disruptive once you get her going. So, he's the kind of champ where it seems like he should be really good at support, but there are just these things about him that make it rough. And a lot of it's basically that he doesn't have a passive, and he's so slow, and he has no mobility or dashes or anything, and he's so squishy. So it's just like, it's a huge sitting duck. I know things like Soraka look like, well, it's like Soraka squishy too. It's like, yes, but she at least has like a very low cooldown harassment tool with her Q, and she heals for like 1 billion, and she can hit people and speed herself up by quite a lot when she runs away with her Q, and she's got her silence. Like, she has other stuff to kind of help her out, so she's also going to be pretty vulnerable. But Ivern is even more so for those reasons. So I love Ivern. He's fun. He's cool. I really wish he could support. It's just really rough in traditional matchups. Now, that being said, there are some pairings, if you're with a duo partner and you guys practice this, where he might be good. Like, he might not just be for fun, right? He might actually be kind of competitive. And there have been, I saw a video where, like, Bjergsen and Dardoch are trying this in Korea with, like, Ivern middle and Rengar jungle. They're winning some on it, but they're also pro players, so we'll see. There was, like, an all-caps video about it a few days ago. But if you do have a Rengar ADC, and I think that could actually work with some comps, then Ivern can actually be pretty good. I mean, he's kind of built to work with Rengar, basically, because whenever you drop that bush, it's going to let Rengar get even more jumps. So he jumps on somebody, you throw a bush right on top of that person, and then he's going to be able to jump again and chase him. And then you can drop another bush, and he's going to be able to jump again. So it just allows him to pretty much permanently stick to people. And then throwing that shield, the Trigger Seed shield, is really good on him as well, because obviously it's going to give him protection so he can throw out his burst. And then it also applies that slow so that he's going to be able to run him down and they can't kite him if he runs out of bush. So that's a really good match with him. And then you're going to have sort of Daisy to help out in team fights, just to stall, block skill shots, just be really sticky and disruptive so that Rengar can do his thing as well. So I think that's good. And then obviously if you hit the root collar, then Rengar is going to be able to jump on him anyways. So he could even, like, perhaps jump out of a bush, get the root collar. You hit the root collar, then he gets closer to him. So there's a lot of stuff that can be pretty good. And Rengar top lane has been really strong for a while. Now that's kind of a different situation than it is bot lane, but especially against some of these squishy bot lanes that are pretty immobile, like, abusing the Rengar jump with Brushmaker can be a pretty decent cheese comp. Now, on paper, it sounds good. In practice, I've never seen it in bot lane, but that is one place where you potentially could do it. Now, I'm trying to think. If you did take Smite, you would still want a gold item early. That would allow you to get Hunter's Talisman, which would give you a lot of mana regen in the laning phase. Because people used to do it with the Karthus bottom, who would take Smite sometimes, like Karthus ADC, they'd take Smite sometimes. I don't know. I think that's getting a little too cute. I think they nerfed some stuff about that. I don't remember what it is, but anyways, I think that could work, potentially. You could get a lot of kills. It's a cheese lane bot. Obviously, it's going to be better against squishies. If they have like a Leona or a Nautilus or something like that, it's going to be a little bit harder. One of those tanks with a lot of CC. But if you're against something like a short range, like a Kaisa paired together with like a Soraka or a Janna or something like that, then you might be able to just punish them and get a lot of kills early on. But yeah, being able to drop that brush for Rengar is a big deal. It's also, I've had people ask about Caitlyn. Maybe. I mean, the thing about Caitlyn is she does get double stacks for her headshot whenever she's in a brush. And the fact that you can put, like, traps in the brush as well. So whenever you are pushing up, on people, then you can, like, use that brush to sort of block out so they can't see you whenever you're trying to harass them. You can put a trap in the brush as well, so if they ever step in the brush, then they're going to step on your trap. So that can be kind of sneaky way to get around things. You do get the double headshot. She can hit people. You can hit people with your root collar. She can hit people with her Q. They're not going to see it coming out of the brush. So, you know, that can be a way to get some extra stuff going on. But to me, it feels a little too cute. I think there are probably better options with Caitlyn. I mean, maybe. Yasuo would be another one who might be kind of interesting. Really anything that's going to be melee, because then you can put that brush down and they're going to be able to farm out of the brush and not take as much harassment off of the wave. So, you know, Yasuo is kind of popular bot lane. Rengar obviously would work. Can't really think of a lot of other melee bots that would be pretty mainstream right now. So there are some niche cases, the best one being Rengar, but there might be some stuff you could draw up with a duo partner that could potentially be pretty solid, but overall, I think it's probably a little too gimmicky. I just think that if you like that kind of stuff, just go with Janna or Soraka if you want a really good enchanter right now, Ivern, or maybe even just like Rakan. I don't know. It's not like he has a 0% win rate, but it's like he almost literally has a 0% play rate. Like the OP.GG score, it's 100% in the jungle. Like nobody has played him as support. And then looking over here at the this was Ivern jungle. I don't know if it shows you other roles or not. But if we go back and look at the grid here, it's not enough to even show up under this. And there's stuff like Malachi shows up with a 0.7 win rate. Who is the lowest pick rate that shows up? Like it's got Scion with a 0.1 pick rate, like 0.1%. It's got Ziggs, Anivia, Teemo, like all of this stuff. And there's not any Ivern games. Like it's not showing up at all on here. So it's like nobody plays him as support. It's like I said, I could see how he could have the potential to be support. Like he, you know, he's got the shield, he's got the root collar, he's got the disruption, all that stuff. It just doesn't happen most of the time. But if you do want to make it happen, get you a duo partner, get someone who's ready to have some fun, grab a Rengar, and try and bot him. I do think that maybe with Rengar, it could actually work if you have a good Rengar player and a good Ivern player. I could see it happening. You're going to have an answer to sieges later on, probably, because Rengar is going to be melee. But if you have, like, I don't know, if you just kill them all, if you're just, like, in an elo where people don't even care about team fights or sieges, they just run around looking for kills, that could work. Or if you have something ranged that, like maybe a mid lane Senna or a Ziggs or Kindred in the jungle, stuff like that. Just a bunch of other ranged champions. Maybe you could do that, but the sieging is going to be tough with Rengar. But you definitely have the potential to get a lot of kills, get Rengar snowballing, and help him sort of rotate around the map and take over. So that is a possibility. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Special thanks again to Travis and Cohen for sponsoring this guide. If you'd like a guide yourself, just email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. Let me know what you have in mind. Come by, check out the stream, check out the rest of the guides and content on the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.